there were 4 college students, I noticed there were college students up here today, 4 guys that were about to take a final exam in college, and rather than study like they should have, they decided to go out and party. I know that's hard to believe college kids would ever do that. And the partying got carried away, and they actually stayed out all night. So by the time the morning rolled around, they really were in no condition to take the test, and they hadn't done any studying. So they said, we need to come up with some kind of story, go to the professor and see if we can get this test delayed for us. Let's see if we can concoct. So they covered themselves kind of with dirt and put some grease on their hands and sprayed water all over them like they'd been sweating and covered their shirts with water. And they went into the professor and they said, we were at a wedding last night, and on the way home we had a flat tire. It was out in the middle of the country, no cell phone service, no cars came by, and we tried to get that tire off and we couldn't get it off. So what we did, we didn't want to leave the car in the country, so we pushed that car all night back to campus. And that's why we look the way we do. Is there any way you could delay the test for us? Well, the professor was a compassionate person, and he said, would 3 days be enough time for you guys to study? Oh, yes, sir, thank you so much. 3 more days would be great. So the 4 boys thought they had done pretty well to pull one over on the professor. So 3 days later, they come in to take the final exam. And the professor says, these are kind of unusual circumstances. I'll let you do this, so we'll do some unusual circumstances when you take it as well. He collected their cell phones, and he put each of them in a different room, 4 rooms for 4 boys. And they went to the test, and they were surprised to see on the test there were only 2 questions. The test was worth 100 points. The first question was worth 1 point, write your name. That was pretty easy. The second question was multiple choice, worth 99 points. And the question was, which tire went flat? A, left front, B, right front, C, left rear, D, right rear. My sister and I used to watch a TV show after school called Captain Penny. And at the end of the show, he would always say, you can fool some of the people all the time, and all the people some of the time, but you can't fool them all. Well, you can't fool God either, and you can't fool the professor. Let us pray. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, our rock and our redeemer. Amen. From today's second lesson. First of all, then, I urge that supplications, prayers, intercessions, and thanksgivings be made for everyone, for kings and for all who are in high positions, so that we may lead a quiet and peaceable life in all godliness and dignity. One of the things, whenever I'm asked to speak up here or do hymn highlighter, that I like about it is it forces me to research what I'm talking about, and I learn so much. And I try to share a lot of that with you guys when I learn things. So I was kind of interested in this idea of prayers and praying. And I was curious just how many prayers there are in the Bible. You start going through from Genesis all the way to Revelation, how many prayers there were. I'd like to tell you that I read the whole Bible in preparation. I kept track each time there was a prayer. But actually I Googled the question, how many prayers are there in the Bible? And the answer was 650 prayers in the Bible, whether you knew that or not. And there's approximately 450 recorded answers to prayer. It talks about prayer a lot. In today's second lesson I just read, we're instructed to pray for everyone, for kings and all in high positions. Other places we're instructed to pray for the unsaved, for fellow Christians, for ministers of the gospel, for the persecuted church, for your enemies, and so on, so on, so on. Something else I found interesting, you may not know this, but in the Bible, there are 5 different body positions that are listed in the Bible for prayer. Okay? Now that doesn't mean you have to use one of these 5 body positions. when you pray. Obviously, if you want to stay on your head and pray, you can. I'm not sure anyone's ever done that in this church, have they? I used to be able to stay on my head. I'm not going to do it today. 2 of those 5 we actually are doing during this service. So what would those 2 be? By the way, I'm a teacher, so I ask a lot of questions. So yes, standing and sitting would be 2. The third one, Shirley, have you gone here your whole life? Did we used to kneel in this church? I'm thinking we did. When Pastor Kolarowski was here, we did kneel. I thought we had kneeled. That's the third one. Does anyone know the other 2? Want to guess?
Read the second lesson today, the last verse of the second lesson.
Thank you. I desire then that in every place the men should pray, lifting up holy hands without anger or argument. So you can lift hand, you can lift 2. We don't do that too much in this church, but you certainly can if you like, I think. And the 5th one, anybody want to guess what the 5th one is? Jesus actually did this at Gethsemane. It says, and going a little further, he fell on his face and prayed. So you would go to your knees and put your face to the ground and pray that way. Those are the 5 that are I thought it was interesting. Paul mentions prayer 41 times in the Bible. And then we come to Jesus. What does Jesus say about prayer? It says in 1 Thessalonians 5:17 that we are to pray without ceasing. You ever heard that? Now, if you took that literally, what that would mean is you pray all the time and never stop, which is pretty much impossible to do. They're saying Jesus prayed so much that he probably came closer to praying constantly than anybody that ever walked the face of the earth. Jesus was in prayer mode all the time. He prayed alone, he prayed in public, he prayed before meals, he prayed before important decisions, he prayed before healing, he prayed after healing, he prayed to do the Father's will, and on and on and on it goes. There are 10 different places in Scripture that Jesus talked about the importance of prayer, including the Lord's Prayer, which is in the Bible as well. In the 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, if you had to guess how many times Jesus prays in the Bible, anyone want to take a guess? So I asked a lot of questions. I didn't know this. He actually prays 25 times in the Bible, in the 4 Gospels. Okay? And I'm not going to go through all 25, well, it was listed all 25 of them. But it's kind of amazing in those 25 times how many times he prays for other people, not himself. He prayed while healing others. He prayed while feeding others. He laid hands on and prayed for little children. He prayed before raising Lazarus from the dead. He prayed for Peter's faith. He prayed for all believers. He prayed for his disciples. And he prayed for his enemies. Okay? You think about when he prayed for his enemies, he was on the cross. He actually said 3 prayers on the cross. 3 of those 25 were said on the cross. The first one was for his enemies. Now, I'm going to tell you what they are. If you know these, you can say it with me, okay? Right after being nailed to the cross, he said what? Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Very good. The second one on the cross, he was dying on the cross. He cried out, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? And the third, in his dying breath, he said, Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit. Now, Katie talked about today's gospel. So you want to go back to today's gospel in your bulletin? Jesus, speaking of other people, said, Teacher, which commandment in the law is the greatest? He said to him, You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the greatest and first commandment, and the second is like it, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. And so I want you to think today, and I ask you, how do you pray? What body position do you use when you pray? When do you pray? Where do you pray? How often do you pray? When you pray, for what length of time do you pray? For what do you pray? For whom do you pray? Now, my mother, who I always talk about my mother, she's given me permission to say this, and she's told me this many times. But when she prays when she goes to bed at night lying down. How many people pray in bed at night lying down? I do. And she said that she has, correct me if I'm wrong, don't correct me if I'm wrong. She says she has 15 categories of prayers that she does. The majority of those 15 categories are for people. I know she says she does widows, she does widowers, she does those facing health issues, she does her friends, she does her family. I think I fall in the family category, right? And other categories as well. And I said to her, how long does this take you to go through 15 categories of prayers? She said about 45 minutes. Now most of us probably, if we're laying in bed, are probably going to fall asleep before 45 minutes, right? But she said if she falls asleep, when she wakes back up, she knows exactly where she left off. And she starts again there to go through her 15 categories of prayers. So if you want to see my mom after church and get on her list, you can see what category, or maybe she'll make you a new category. You can make a category, people that asked in church today to be on your list. She will pray for you. But I take great solace in the fact that my mother prays for me every night. It means a lot to me. Okay, as you all know, I always have a story to tell. That first one wasn't the story. And I looked at the first lesson today, if you look at about Jonah and the whale. I'm kind of fascinated with this whole idea of shipwrecks and that sort of thing. So the story is kind of about that. This Jonah and the whale thing, I remember being a little kid like these guys were. It said Jonah lived in the whale's belly for 3 days. And I always, as a little kid, thought, okay, is he like on a couch? Is he like watching TV in there? You know, is there a refrigerator? What's that mean he lived in there? And as I got older, I'm like, there's no way somebody lived in a whale's belly for 3 days. It's got spit back out. But I had heard somebody actually did live in the belly of a whale. Anybody know this? Nobody knows this. I'm going to teach you something new here. His name was actually, I looked this up, James Bartley, and this happened in 1891. He was 38 years old at the time. And back then, they would go on these whaling expeditions, and it would take about 2.5 years to do your whaling expedition. This happened off the Falkland Islands. You probably heard of those. And what happens when they see a whale, they would send longboats out, like special boats. They're going 2 guys in a boat, and they'd have harpoons, and they'd harpoon that whale. Well, the whale didn't like when he got harpooned. Obviously, whales don't like being harpooned. And it knocked the boat in the water. One guy drowned, one guy disappeared. The guy that disappeared was James Bartley. He actually fell into the whale's mouth and got swallowed whole. Nobody knew where he was. So they killed the whale, they skinned the whale, and they find 36 hours later James Bartley. You might say 36 hours isn't 3 days. But I think it was like the end of one day, 24 hours, and then the beginning of the next. So it actually was kind of 3 days. And they found him curled up in there. It says that, let's see, what does it say? His skin was bleached by gastric juices, and he was nearly blind. I mean, if you're in a whale for 3 days, I mean, you know, you're in pretty tough shape when you come out, right? They couldn't just take him to a hospital there in the middle of the ocean. He actually recovered for 2 weeks in the captain's cabin and went back to work the 3rd week. He died 18 years later. Kind of an interesting story. Now, I will have to say, the captain's wife, years later, said that never happened, that was not true, and to this day, they're still debating whether that actually happened or not. But it's kind of interesting. This shipwreck thing, I think my fascination was in growing up. I told you we watched Captain Penn, but another show I often watched was Gilligan's Island. Who are my Gilligan's Island people that watch Gilligan? Oh, look at all the hands. Very good. If you've never heard of Gilligan's Island, you need to watch today. Actually ran from 1964 to 1967. Some of you may not have been alive then. Some of you were. 98 episodes, lasted 3 seasons. The SS Minnow was the name of the ship, and these 7 characters got stranded on an island, and every time they would get about to be rescued, Gilligan was kind of this bumbling guy that would mess things up and they never got rescued. Now, sometimes they had guests appear on the show and they would come on the island and they'd leave. I don't quite understand that. But like I say, there were 7 characters. Who wants to try to name the 7 characters for us? You all put your hands up. You want to go for that? Say it. Mary Ann's correct. Professor's correct. Ginger's correct. Thurston Howe, and his wife's name was? Lovey, very good. By the way, Lovey Howe actually was a millionaire in real life. You didn't know that, did you? Is that all of them?
The skipper.
Skipper, right. Gilligan, Mary Ann, Ginger, the skipper, the professor, Thurston Howe, and Lovey Howe. Very good. You guys are pretty good. That kind of led then to my fascination with like my favorite all-time movie, if not my favorite close, which is the movie Castaway, starring Tom Hanks in the year 2000. I just watched it again on Friday for about the 30th time. How many people have seen the movie Castaway with, oh, look at all the hands there. You asked Bruce about why the FedEx box was there. Now you know. Now you know. But for those of you that don't know, he was a systems engineer for FedEx. The plane crashes. 5 people were killed in the crash. He ends up on this deserted island. I think 11 different packages washed ashore. Now, we don't see him open all 11, but one of them was ice skates. Remember, he uses the blades from the ice skates. One of them was a dress, and he used the netting from the skirt of the dress to catch fish. And one was VCR tapes, and he used the tapes to make a raft and keep the logs together. And of course, then there was a famous volleyball named what? Wilson that washed ashore. Kind of interesting about Wilson. The screenwriter for that movie actually went, when he was writing the movie, and stayed on an island just to see what it was like, a deserted island, and a volleyball washed ashore. You didn't know that, did you? Isn't that fascinating? He also had some coconuts. He didn't know how to open the coconuts. And if you notice on the movie, Tom Hanks can't open the coconuts at first either. It's kind of interesting. I had my FedEx box that washed ashore last week on my porch. Actually from the Cleveland Browns. It's my gift, being a season ticket holder. I'm not going to show you what's in it. If you want to come after church and look, you can see what the gift is for all Cleveland Browns fans. Hopefully it was Super Bowl tickets, though. Maybe not. All right. What's that? Better keep praying. Trust me. That first drive was pretty good the other day, though. My favorite part of the movie is where he gets rescued. He comes back to civilization, and Helen Hunt, oh, I love Helen Hunt, is his girlfriend slash fiance. 4 years later, thinking he's died, she's married someone else and has a child. He goes to return the pocket watch to her house in the middle of the night. They're standing in the kitchen, and he says, I wrote this down on Friday to make sure I had it correct. So let me get one thing straight here. We have a pro football team now, but they're in Nashville. The Houston Oilers are the Tennessee Titans. And she gives him the car back that was his car, and as he's driving off, of course, she runs through the pouring rain down the lane, and in the middle of the street, they jump out and embrace. And she says, I always knew you were alive, I knew it, but everybody said I had to stop saying that. I had to let you go. I love you. You're the love of my life. And he drives off. And goosebumps. That's my favorite scene like of all time. Just so you know. So that kind of brings us to the story I was telling you about, a little segue there. This story is about a shipwreck, and 2 men named Ralph and Pete, they're in a shipwreck, and they're the only survivors, and they end up on an island together. And they decide, it was a rather big island, it kind of went on for miles, it wasn't a small island. And they decide what they were going to do is they were going to divide the island up in half, and Ralph would go to that half, and Pete would stay on this half. And they would each pray, and they would see which person's prayers were stronger. They prayed to God, which person had the stronger prayers. So Ralph went his way, Pete came this way, Of course, Pete, his first thought was, the sun's pretty hot. I sure wish I had some shelter. And he looked behind, there was a hill there, and suddenly there was a cave that appeared in that hill. Wow, shelter right away. Pretty good. So the next day came, and they say you need water to survive, right? You can't drink the ocean water. So he said, "Dear Lord, would you please provide some water for me?" And he looked up, and a single cloud came right behind that hill, and it rained. And he walked behind the hill, and there he found a stream with the most cold, refreshing, clear water you'd ever find. Pretty good. Started walking, looking for something to eat. "Dear Lord, could you please provide me with something to eat?" Came around the bend, there was a grove of trees, apple trees, orange trees, coconut trees. Pretty good. So this went on, and all the while, Ralph on the other side of the island, he's got nothing. And Pete's got shelter, water, and food. But he gets kind of tired of eating the fruit and such. He says, "Could you provide me with some kind of meat?" He's on the beach, and all of a sudden a big wave comes back, and goes back out in the ocean, deposits 3 huge fish right there on the beach. Wow, some meat. Of course, you got to do what to the meat? You got to cook it, but he had no way to cook it. "Dear Lord, could you please provide me with some fire so I can cook this meat?" All of a sudden, lightning comes down from the sky and strikes this bush and catches on fire. He's got fire, and he makes a big fire, and he keeps that fire. He's able to cook his food. All the while, Ralph, on the other side of the island, he has nothing. Well, Pete gets a little bit lonely. Says, "Do you think you could provide me a companion?" And lo and behold, swimming in the water is this beautiful woman. Swims the water like this, don't you? She swims up, and she was in a shipwreck too, and she survived. And there she is. Pretty good stuff. And this went on for a little over a week. Every time Pete prayed for something, he got it. And Ralph, on the other side of the island, he's got nothing. So finally, after, like I say, about a week and a half, Pete finally says, "Dear Lord, you've been so good to me. You provide everything I asked for, but I kind of have maybe just one more request. Any way you could send somebody to rescue us and get us off this island, my female companion and I?" And guess what? On the horizon, here comes a boat, a fishing boat. And they're waving their arms, and the boat comes up to them, and they say, "Hey, we're stranded here. Could you rescue us?" And sure, jump in the boat. So Pete is just ready to get in the boat, and this voice from heaven comes down, the voice of God says, this is my God voice. "Pete, are you actually going to get in that boat and leave your friend Ralph on the other side of the island?" Pete says, "Well, we kind of had a deal, Lord. We both were going to pray and see whose prayers were stronger. And to tell you the truth, I don't mean to sound boastful, but look at all the stuff I got. And I'm not sure really that he's deserving to get rescued off the island. But I do have one more question while I'm talking to you here, God. Could you just tell me just what did Ralph pray for over there?" And the voice said, "Ralph's prayer each day was that all of your prayers would be answered." Ralph's prayer each day was that all of your prayers would be answered. In a few minutes, if you look in your bulletin, we're going to come to a part of the service that says prayers of intercession. And you're going to hear a list of names read during those prayers of intercession session. You can find those names on the insert in your bulletin. Some of those names might be sitting with us today. Some of them might be friends or acquaintances that you know. Some of those names are probably people you don't know who they are and you've never met them. But let's be aware, those list of names are real names for real people with real concerns in need of real prayers. May we, when those names are read, be more Ralph-like in our prayers and put our meditations to the need of our neighbor. And furthermore, may we be more Christ-like in our prayers. We talked about how Christ constantly prayed for others and took it one step further, gave up his life to save us. For you see, at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, each of us is going to go in that classroom or that room before the Lord to take that final exam. What the question or questions will be, I don't know, we don't know. It may be which tire went flat. It may be what team did the Houston Oilers become. Or more likely, it may be what are the two greatest commandments, and did you live your life accordingly? Which tire went flat? I'm sorry, dear Lord, there was no flat tire. Please forgive me for my deception, and please forgive me for all my iniquities. What team did the Houston Oilers become? The Houston Oilers became the Tennessee Titans. I too, Lord, am willing to pick up and move and go wherever you may lead me. And finally, what are the two greatest commandments, and did you live your life accordingly? You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, with all your mind. And secondly, you shall love your what? Neighbor as yourself. Did you live your life accordingly? May we all answer, yes, Lord. I love you, I promise you, I praise you, I honor you, I worship you, I serve you. And yes, Lord, I love my neighbor. I love my neighbor in my thoughts, my words, my deeds, and I love my neighbor in my prayers. Amen. We're now going to sing